They changed the locks on a Tuesday. A house I had bought. A mortgage in my name only. A roof I had fixed twice with my own hands. Walls I had painted. A driveway I had sealed in August heat while they sat inside with the air conditioning I paid for. They changed the locks. And when I found out, I did not call. I did not go back. I did not knock on the door that used to be mine. I took a screenshot. I forwarded it to my lawyer. And I smiled for the first time in months. Because they had just made the biggest mistake of their lives. And I had been waiting 30 days for exactly this moment. My name is Marcus. I am 37 years old. I work hard. Always have. I am not a loud man. I am not dramatic. I do not make scenes or raise my voice or throw things. That has always been my way. But quiet does not mean weak. And patient does not mean blind. This is my story. If you enjoy stories like this, please hit the subscribe button and turn on your notification bell so you don't miss any of our stories. Also like and comment. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I read every single comment. Let me tell you what a typical Tuesday looked like in my house. I woke up at 5:15. I showered, dressed, and made coffee. I drove 40 minutes to my first job, warehouse logistics, 6 to 2. Then I drove to my second job, delivery driving, 3 to 9. I came home around 9:30, ate whatever was left on the stove if there was anything, and went to bed. I did this 5 days a week, sometimes 6. My wife Linda did not work during this period. Her mother, Gloria, had moved in with us 3 years earlier under the understanding that it was temporary, just until she got back on her feet. The two of them spent their days in the house I was paying for, and every evening when I came home, the house looked exactly as it had when I left, which meant nobody had cleaned anything, and dinner was whatever Linda had felt like making, which was sometimes very little. I paid the mortgage. I paid both car notes, mine and Linda's. I paid the utilities, the insurance, the grocery bills, the streaming subscriptions, the internet, the phone plans for both of us. I fixed things when they broke, because calling a repairman cost money, and money was something I was always calculating. I asked for nothing in return. That was my first mistake. Every night at dinner, the three of us sat at a table I had bought in a house I was buying, and Linda and Gloria talked to each other, and I ate mostly in silence. Not because I had nothing to say, because over time I had learned that what I said didn't land the way it used to. My opinions about the house were difficult. My preferences about how money was spent were controlling. My exhaustion at the end of a 14-hour day was, apparently, not interesting conversation. I ate my dinner, and I went to bed, and I got up and did it again. Then one evening Linda got a phone call. She looked at the screen, stood up from the table, and went outside to take it. I watched her through the kitchen window. The way she laughed, the way she turned slightly away, the way her whole posture changed into something lighter and younger. When she came back inside, she sat down and picked up her fork, and she would not look at me. I finished my dinner. I washed my plate, and somewhere deep in my chest, a quiet alarm started ringing. I need to tell you about Gloria, because Gloria is important to this story in ways I didn't fully understand until much later. She arrived with 2 suitcases and a box of her decorative items, and the firm conviction that she was doing us a favor by moving in. Within 3 months, she had rearranged the living room, replaced the curtains in the bedroom hallway with one she preferred, and converted my home office, the room I had set aside for my paperwork and the rare occasion when I needed quiet, into what she called a reading room, complete with her armchair and her shelf of books. When I told Linda this was not okay, Linda told me to stop being difficult. I repainted the corner of the garage and put a desk in there instead. Sometime after that I came home to find a key on Gloria's keyring that I didn't recognize. It took me a moment to place it. Then I realized it was a copy of our front door key. One that had been made without anyone mentioning it to me, without anyone asking, without anyone thinking that maybe the man whose name was on the mortgage might want to know who had a copy of his front door key. I didn't say anything about the key. I filed it away. I kept paying the bills, and I started paying closer attention. I have always handled the finances in our house. Linda knew this and had, over the years, gradually stopped engaging with any of it. The accounts, the bills, the balances. This suited her, and it suited Gloria, I think, because it meant neither of them had to think about money. It just appeared, because Marcus made it appear. But I looked at those numbers every month. And around month 3 of Linda's evasive phone calls and won't look at me evenings, I noticed something that made me sit down. $800 every month, leaving the joint account under household expenses. I went back through the last several statements. It had been happening for 8 months. I asked Linda about it casually, over dinner, keeping my voice light. She said it was household expenses. I said I'd been through all the household receipts and couldn't find it. She said I must have missed something and changed the subject. That night after she was asleep, I went through every single receipt I could find. Every grocery run, every utility payment, every household purchase. The $800 was not in any of them. I kept looking until I found a single receipt that had slipped under a drawer liner in Linda's bedside table. It wasn't from a grocery store or a utility company or any household supplier. It had a man's name on it. I ran the name quietly. I didn't ask Linda. I didn't confront anyone. I just looked. Derek had grown up in the same town as Linda. They had dated in college. She had mentioned him once, years ago, in passing, in the way people mention someone they have filed away in the past. He had moved away and then, apparently, moved back. 8 months ago, the same 8 months the money had been disappearing. I sat with that information for a few days. I want to be honest with you about what those days felt like, because I think people sometimes tell these stories like the person at the center of them was made of steel the whole time. I was not made of steel. I was a man who had given everything he had to a life that was apparently being spent on someone else. And there were nights during those few days when I sat in my garage office and felt a weight in my chest that was hard to breathe around. But I did not cry. I did not drink. I did not call anyone. I opened a new bank account in my name only, and I moved my next paycheck directly into it. And I said nothing. This is the part of the story that people find hardest to believe. That I kept going normally for 30 days, coming home, eating dinner, being civil, paying the bills, while knowing what I knew. But I had a lawyer to consult, documents to gather, a plan to build, and none of that happens in a day. I kept paying every bill, the mortgage, the car notes, the groceries. But from the moment I opened that separate account, every dollar of my salary went into it. Not theirs, mine. I smiled at dinner. I asked about their days. I fixed a leaking pipe under the kitchen sink on a Saturday morning because the house was still mine and I still took care of what was mine. And then Linda came home one evening looking pleased with herself and said she had exciting news. She wanted to renovate the kitchen. She had already found a contractor. She had already, she said, been in touch with him about a quote. She was glowing when she said it, animated in a way I hadn't seen in a long time. I asked what the contractor's name was. She said his name was Derek. I looked at her for a moment, just a moment. Then I said, "That's great, Linda. I'm sure he'll do good work." And I went upstairs and I sat on the edge of the bed and I made a list. 3 items. 1. Contact a lawyer. 2. Move the remaining joint funds to my personal account. 3. Call the mortgage company. That was it. That was the whole list. 3 things that, done in the right order, would dismantle everything that had been built on top of me without my knowledge. But before I could act on item 1, Gloria came into the kitchen the next morning while I was drinking my coffee before my shift. She stood in the doorway of the kitchen she had gradually taken over, her spice rack on my counter, her dish towels on my oven handle, and she looked at me the way she had always looked at me, which was like I was a useful inconvenience. "You know," she said, "you should count yourself lucky to be part of this family. Not every man gets what you have." I looked at her over my coffee cup. "Linda deserves better than what you give her," she continued. "And honestly, this house feels more like mine anyway. I've put more into it than you ever gave credit for." I set down my coffee cup. I nodded slowly, and I picked up my keys and walked out the front door. I did not go to work. I went to a lawyer's office downtown. A woman named Patricia who had been recommended by a colleague who had been through his own difficult divorce 2 years earlier. I sat across from her, and I put everything on the table. The bank statements with the $800 monthly withdrawals, the mortgage documents, the utility accounts, the car loan paperwork, all of it. She went through it carefully, methodically. She asked me clear questions, and I gave her clear answers. When she was done, she looked up at me and said, "You are protected. The mortgage is in your name only. The primary financial liability on every major account is yours, which means you have clear standing to initiate proceedings." Then she kept looking through the documents. She went quiet for a moment. "Mr. Marcus," she said, "did you know that when Linda refinanced her car 2 years ago, she listed you as sole financial guarantor?" I said I did not know that. "She signed a document making you legally responsible for her car debt without informing you," Patricia said. "That changes some things." She was smiling slightly, not unkindly, just with the calm satisfaction of an attorney who has just found the thing that makes a case airtight. I drove home and stopped at a flower shop on the way. I bought Linda roses. For the next 2 weeks, I was the best version of a husband I had been in years. Flowers on the kitchen table, dinners I cooked myself, compliments about how she looked. I listened when she talked. I laughed at her stories. I was present and warm and attentive. Linda told Gloria that he had finally come around. Gloria said not to trust it. Linda laughed her off. But here is what was also happening during those 2 weeks, underneath the flowers and the dinners. I rented a storage unit across town and began quietly moving things that were mine: tools, equipment, personal items, boxes of documents, and paperwork that had my name on them. I paid the deposit on a new apartment in another city where a job transfer I had quietly applied for 3 months earlier had just come through. I updated my work address with HR. I removed my name from every household subscription. I changed the mailing address on every financial account. I was not leaving in anger. I was leaving in order. On day 28, Linda found a moving box in the garage. She asked me about it. I said it was old stuff I was clearing out. Donations. She said that was a good idea and went back inside. On day 30, I got a message from Patricia at 3 in the morning. Everything is filed. Everything is ready. You can move whenever you choose. I put the phone down and lay in the dark, and I breathed, slowly, feeling something I can only describe as the quiet before a door closes. I woke up at 6. I showered and put on my best suit, the charcoal gray one I wore to important meetings, the one Linda had once said made me look like I meant business. I made coffee. I stood at the kitchen window and looked at the backyard for a while. The garden I had dug out and planted 2 summers ago. The fence I had replaced panel by panel the summer before that. Then I placed an envelope on the kitchen counter. I took one last slow look at the living room. Gloria's curtains. Gloria's armchair in the corner. The decorative items she had placed on my shelves. The reading room where my office used to be. I picked up my one bag. I walked to the front door. I left my house keys on the hook by the door. I did not need them anymore. I sat in the parking lot 2 blocks away, and I made one phone call. To the mortgage company. I informed them, calmly and clearly, that I would no longer be covering payments on the property at that address, effective at the end of the current notice period. I provided Patricia's contact information as my legal representative. I asked them to direct all further communication to her office. The representative on the phone asked if I was aware there was a 30-day notice period before any default proceedings could begin. I said, I know. I already waited. I started the car. I drove to the interstate. I did not look in the rearview mirror. Linda came downstairs at 9. I know the sequence of events from that morning because Linda's best friend Carol, who had never particularly liked Gloria, filled me in later. She felt I deserved to know. Gloria was already in the kitchen when Linda came down. Gloria saw the envelope first. She picked it up and opened it, without asking, without hesitating, just opened it the way she opened everything in that house, as though ownership was a formality. She read the divorce papers. She saw the bank statements, 8 months of withdrawals, itemized and highlighted. She saw the printed copy of Derek's contractor invoice, with Linda's personal email address visible in the CC line of the correspondence chain, showing she had been coordinating with him directly. She put everything back in the envelope. She sat down at the kitchen table. She said nothing to Linda, who came in a few minutes later asking if there was coffee. Gloria had always been loud, always had a comment, always had a reaction, always made her presence known from across a room. Carol said that the silence from her that morning was the strangest thing she had ever witnessed. Linda eventually noticed the envelope. She read it herself, and then she sat down across from her mother, and they looked at each other. Linda's first response to finding those divorce papers was rage. It moved fast. Within a few hours, she had called a locksmith, and by noon, every lock in the house had been changed. She posted on Facebook that afternoon. I know because I still had her on my friends list at that point, and the notification came to my phone as I was unpacking boxes in my new apartment 3 hours away. Starting fresh. Some people don't deserve what they had. I read it twice. Then I liked the post. Then I screenshotted it and forwarded it to Patricia, who replied 3 minutes later with a single word: perfect. 3 weeks after that, the mortgage bill arrived. Linda called my number. I did not answer. She texted several times over the following days. I did not reply. She drove to my old office building and asked for me at reception. My former co-workers told her I had been promoted and transferred to a different city 2 weeks prior. She stood in that lobby, and I imagine the ground shifted slightly under her feet, the way it does when you realize that while you were changing the locks on a house, the person you were locking out had already been gone for 30 days. Derek moved in officially. I heard about this secondhand, and I confess I felt a small, quiet satisfaction that I'm not entirely proud of, but I'm going to be honest. He told Linda not to worry, that he would handle everything, that the mortgage, the bills, the whole situation, he had it covered. He lasted 11 days. On the 12th day, he told Linda the mortgage payment was more than he had expected, and that he wasn't really in a position to take that on right now. He used the words, "I need to be honest with you about where I'm at financially," which is one of the most reliable sentences in the English language for meaning, "I cannot help you with this." Linda called Gloria's sister to borrow money. Gloria's sister asked a reasonable question. Why couldn't Gloria help? She lived in the house too, didn't she? Surely Gloria had some resources of her own? Linda went quiet, because Linda had been operating under the assumption that Derek was funded by some combination of his contractor work and whatever financial arrangements he had in place. She had not thought to ask where, exactly, his money came from. She had not asked why he always seemed to have what he needed without any visible source of significant income. She had not asked about the $800 a month, leaving the joint account every month for 8 months. She started asking those questions now. The truth came out the way these things usually come out, in pieces and all at once. Derek was not Linda's secret love interest who had conveniently reappeared in her life. Derek was Gloria's nephew. He had grown up in Gloria's sister's house, and Gloria had known him his whole life. The plan, and I want you to understand that there was a plan, that this was not an accident or coincidence, was for Gloria to use the joint account to fund Derek, keep the amount small enough to seem like household expenses, and gradually position him close enough to Linda that when the marriage fell apart, he would be the soft landing. Derek had been playing a role. Whether Linda had ever genuinely felt something for him, I cannot say, but the relationship had been architected by Gloria from the beginning, using money stolen from my account, using her daughter as a vehicle, without Linda knowing any of it. Linda had not been having an affair. She had been managed by her own mother. When she finally understood what had actually happened, what Gloria had been doing, who Derek actually was, why he had appeared when he did, she didn't call Gloria first. She called me. My phone rang on a Thursday evening. I was sitting at my desk in my new apartment, finishing up some work, a cup of coffee going cold beside me. I saw her name, and I sat with it for a moment. Then I answered. She cried through most of it. Not the kind of crying that's about the mortgage or the money or being embarrassed on Facebook. The deep kind. The kind that comes when you understand that someone you trusted completely has been treating you as a piece in their own game. She told me everything. About realizing Derek was Gloria's nephew. About tracing the account withdrawals back to Gloria's access. About confronting Gloria and Gloria not denying it, just saying she had done what was best for the family. I listened to all of it without interrupting. When she finished, the line was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Did you know?" I looked at the wall of my apartment, at the clean bare desk, at the window with a view of a city that was entirely new, entirely mine. I said, "I know. I always did." Silence. "From the beginning," she said. "Most of it," I said. "Not your mother's part. That I only understood later. But the money, the receipts, Derek, yes." Another silence. Longer. "And you didn't say anything," she said. "It wasn't an accusation. It was just wonder." I said everything I needed to say. I told her. I just said it to my lawyer. She didn't have anything to add to that. I said goodbye and I hung up the phone. My apartment was on the 4th floor of a building in a city I had visited once for a work conference 3 years earlier and thought, quietly to myself at the time, that I could live here. Good streets, a decent commute, the kind of neighborhood that had a hardware store and a coffee shop and a park within walking distance. I had one photo on my desk, not of Linda, not of the house, the garden, the fence I had built panel by panel, not of any part of the life I had left behind. It was a photograph I'd taken on my phone the morning I left. The kitchen counter, the envelope sitting on it in the early morning light, everything still and quiet before anyone else was awake. I kept it because I needed to remember what it felt like to act with intention, to do the right thing for myself with patience and without rage. To walk out a door I had every right to walk out of and not look back. That photo meant, you did this right. Then someone slid a letter under my apartment door. I heard it arrive one evening, the soft sound of paper on the floor. I looked up from my desk, and I recognized the handwriting on the envelope immediately. Gloria. I picked it up. I sat back down at my desk. I opened it. It was not an apology. I want to be clear about that. Not a word of apology, not a sentence of acknowledgement of what she had done or what had happened to Linda because of it. Not a mention of the money she had stolen or the family she had fractured or the nephew she had used as a tool. It was a request. The house was in foreclosure, she wrote. She needed to find a new place to live and was applying for a rental. The rental company required a character reference. She was asking me, the man whose money she had stolen, whose house was now being repossessed, whose marriage she had helped engineer the collapse of, to write a letter on her behalf. She closed with, "Family helps family." I read it twice, not because I needed to reread it, but because I wanted to make sure I was reading it exactly as it was written, with no softening in my interpretation. Then I folded it neatly. I put it back in her envelope. I found a pen on my desk. On the front of the envelope, I wrote 2 words. I put a stamp on it. I dropped it in the mail slot on my way to work the next morning. The 2 words I wrote were, "Wrong number." I paid for everything in that house for years. I paid with my money. I paid with my time. I paid with my silence at dinner tables and my patience in the face of being told I was difficult for having opinions about my own home. I paid and I paid and I kept paying. And the day they changed those locks, they thought they had the last word. They did not understand that I had already said mine. The invoice for that chapter of my life has been settled. In full. And I kept the receipt.